Hey everyone, and welcome to this video. Going to talk about a Marsupial's network functionality, specifically talking about the Marsupial Instructor companion application that allows faculty or educators to control Marsupial EMR during a simulation. At least that's what I designed it for. You can use it whatever you want to use it for. But the idea was that the instructor could remotely control the EMR and reveal information to students during a simulation. Couple of considerations is that Marsupial Instructor is kind of basic in how it works. It relies on the instructor pre-creating things to be enabled during the sim. So you can't type orders into Marsupial Instructor or new results or imaging results, things like that. The only thing Marsupial Instructor does is connect to the EMR and it will enable pre-created orders results that are disabled. So I talked about this in the Marsupial Editor video a little bit, so if you haven't watched that, I recommend watching the Marsupial Editor video first so you get a good understanding of how to enable and disable orders and results and things like that, and how Marsupial Instructor, the idea of how it's supposed to work. So with that said, Marsupial Instructor can control Marsupial EMR over a network. It was designed to be used over a local network. For example, my simulation center, we have a local network specific to our nursing laboratory, and it's not connected to our university's network. It only runs in our nursing lab. So the only computers on that network are my nursing server, the workstation on wheels the students use, and some laptops to control our mannequins. Marsupial Instructor is not designed to be used over the internet, so I do not recommend that. Another consideration is that you'll probably need to involve your IT people to help set up this and get the computers talking together. You will need to open up some ports in a firewall, assuming you have one of those enabled, to allow Marsupial Instructor to talk to Marsupial EMR over the network. By default, they'll probably be disabled and not work, so you might have to get your IT people to help with that. I think that's enough intro. So let's talk about Marsupial EMR, the setup involved with that. So Marsupial EMR has a settings menu. We'll have to go to that. So we go to tools and settings. The main setting we have to change is the server IP address. The server IP address is the IP address of the computer running Marsupial EMR. So this would be the student computer. If you don't know how to get the IP address of your computer, reach out to your IT folks and they'll be able to get that for you. But you just enter that IP into this box and hit save. That's the only real setup that you have to do in the EMR program. To enable the network communication, you do have to start the server. In the network menu, there is a start server and stop server option. So whenever you start Marsupial EMR, the server will be disabled, so you'll have to start the server to allow it to receive commands from Marsupial Instructor. If you're ever unsure of whether the server is stopped or started, you can always refer in the status bar down below. Right now I have the server stopped, so I'm going to start the server. Now the server is started. So let's look at Marsupial Instructor. There is really only one setting for Marsupial Instructor, and that is the server IP address. So this is the same IP address that we just got and entered into Marsupial EMR. So the server IP is the IP address of the computer running Marsupial EMR, or the student computer, the workstation on wheels. So you just type that into the server IP box. And if you have your server started, you'll be able to connect to Marsupial EMR by hitting the connect button. You'll get a pop-up saying successfully connected, and to select the patient on this drop-down box here, you will see all the patients that are currently loaded in the database that's loaded in Marsupial EMR. So let's take a look at Michael Holloway, because I have orders entered for him. Once you select the patient, it'll read all the orders that, or all the order results, imaging, and notes that can be enabled. So it'll show everything that's you entered and made disabled when you're making the patient chart. Again, you can't type in orders and results. You can only enable predefined, pre-created orders that are disabled. So you'll have to know your scenario and create the full scenario to make this feature useful. You won't be able to create orders on the fly from the instructor application. So it'll list everything on the orders tab, all the orders that can be enabled, and they have an enable button right next to the order. So you just click the enable and it'll enable that order in the EMR. You saw when I clicked the enable button, the new orders flag box in Marsupial EMR turned red, indicating to the student that there are new orders. The student will be able to click the new orders or new results or new imaging boxes, and it'll tell them what orders you just enabled. So this view just gives an overview of the order or result or whatever. It's just a flag. The students should be told to clear and refresh that once they finish reviewing them. And then those orders will then be viewable in the orders tab. Same thing with results, or same thing with imaging. The results, again, you might have different times for the results. So I have some results that come back at 6:11 in the scenario time, and I have results to come back an hour later at 7:15. So you just have to pick the ones that you want to enable and enable them. Clear and refresh, and now those results will show up. Same thing with the imaging. I don't have the notes function enabled because I never used it. So order results and imaging are currently can be enabled through Marsupial Instructor. I think one important thing I'll mention is that for medication orders specifically, if you enable them, you will have to create like the medication order. And then if you want the medication or the students to administer that medication, you will have to also pre-make the MAR entries in Marsupial Editor before the sim even starts. If you leave the order disabled, and this is letting you enable it during the sim, when you enable the order, it'll also show all those MAR entries associated with that medication order on the MAR. So right now we don't have any sodium chloride fluid other than a syringe. But if we enable this one-time bolus, we'll get that new order for a one-time 500 ml bolus. Once we clear that, it'll show up on the MAR, provided that you created the MAR entry for it along with the medication order. So when you enable these orders, the students will be able to administer the medication. That's basically how Marsupial Instructor works. The only other consideration is part of the setup. You may need to involve your IT people. The key is getting the server IP address. One other consideration is opening the ports that Marsupial EMR communicates over. So Marsupial EMR uses port 52101 as its communication port, and it uses both TCP and UDP communications. So port 52101 on Marsupial EMR, the computer that's running that, the workstation on wheels or the student computer, will need port 52101, both TCP and UDP opened. So if you don't know what that means, then you will need to get your IT people involved to open those ports. Again, this should be run over a local network and not something exposed to the internet, so shouldn't have a problem with security. Once you have those ports enabled, you'll be able to connect to Marsupial EMR with Marsupial Instructor. You'll be able to select other patients too and enable any orders that are under them. If you're running a multi-patient sim, you can just change the patient you're looking at and enable orders there as well. If you enable orders on a patient the students aren't looking at, it'll still pop up the flag. It'll just have the patient's name there. And then even if the student's on the screen and you enable orders, it'll still populate on there. So the students will be able to see all orders that come through while they have that new orders flag or new results screen popped up. Right, I think that about sums up everything you need to know about Marsupial Instructor. If you have any questions or need further clarification, please look at the manual or wiki on the Marsupial EMR GitHub site. There's a link to that under help. If you go to Marsupial webpage and click that, it'll take you to the Marsupial webpage, and where you can go, there's a link to the manual and wiki on there.